So before we begin the next session, we've already informed you regarding the prerequisites for the session, the installation of Ganesh, which is a blockchain simulator, and Node.js. I hope the participants are equipped with that. Okay. So welcome to the second session. Mr. Ajmal Ahmad Kodakar is a freelance developer who is very experienced in blockchain projects, specialized in Ethereum and Hyperledger Sawtooth. He did his Bachelor's of Technology from the University of Calicut and currently is working as a blockchain developer in Panasonic. He's also a certified Ethereum developer, a certified blockchain associate, certified Hyperledger developer, certified as a full stack web application developer, and the list goes on. So we are indeed proud and happy that we have got a technical prodigy with us to take and lead the second session, which is actually a demo on Sawtooth. So over to you, Ajmal.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, so today we'll be covering a POC based on Hyperledger Sawtooth. Then we'll be looking forward to a Remix IDE, which is an online editor from which we can communicate to the blockchain simulator Ganesh. So I think that participants have already installed Ganesh in your system. So initially, I'll just do an overview of our session. Okay. Is everybody seeing my screen?
Yes, we can see.
Okay, fine. So we'll be discussing about the public chains and private chains. We'll be discussing a POC based on Hyperledger Sawtooth, which is vehicle management system. Then we'll be discussing some smart contract based on Ethereum, which is written in Solidity. It is another POC based on Ethereum. We'll be deploying these smart contracts into the Ganesh blockchain simulator. Then we'll be interacting with the smart contract, which is deployed in the Ganesh simulator. So first of all, I'll go with the Sawtooth POC. So these are the link. This is my GitHub link. If anybody wants to get the projects which I'm going to discuss today, they can go to this GitHub link and can clone the projects. And these are some links which is to be checked. You have to install Ganesh from the troubleshoot, which you can just go and download the Ganesh from the troubleshoot site. Remix ethereum.org is an online editor. You can just go to the browser and can access the remix. From there, we can import the smart contracts into the remix, and then we can deploy that smart contracts into the Ganesh simulator. But first, we'll go with the Sawtooth demo. Then we'll come into the Ganesh demo. Okay. So when it comes to Hyperledger Sawtooth project, it is a distributed ledger technology is used in that. We all know that in traditional method, we have centralized ledger. In, in the centralized ledger, we'll be having a single point, a single node who will be controlling the entire ledger, which is different from the distributed ledger. In the case of distributed ledger, the copy of ledger will be available in each node, so that this technology can be used in order to ensure the security of the data, tamper proofness, etc., etc. So as previous sessions discussed, many of the experienced persons explained in the previous sections, you all know the difference between, I think you all know the difference between the distributed ledger technology and the centralized ledger technology. Then about the project, the POC related to hyperledger sawtooth is that we are going to discuss here today is vehicle management system. This is just as application on private sawtooth network that creates a distributed ledger with a decentralized platform for all motor vehicles department of India. Here, the entire motor vehicles department of India is brought into a single blockchain network so that they can communicate each other, they can store data corresponding to each other and can access data with some restrictions so that every parties will be involved in this network.
Ajmal, sorry for interrupting. Can you please set your slides to the full screen mode?
Okay, fine.
Thank you.
Okay, so in this vehicle management system, as I said, each parties will be in this network. For example, registration authorities, insurance companies, pollution certifying companies, and police department will be in a single platform. Nowadays, in the traditional method, we all know that these different departments or different entities keeps the data in their own servers. Okay, they have these data associated with their department in their own servers. It is different, like each parties is different uh, from the network. But when it comes to our POC, we bring these registration authorities, insurance team, pollution team, and the police department into a single platform, and each data associated with these departments will be stored in a single blockchain network, which is private. We all know that Hyperledger deals with private chains, and but Ethereum deals with public chains. But we also know that we can create private chains in the Ethereum. So when it comes to Hyperledger Sawtooth project, we have the private chains. In the vehicle management system, this application is designed to bring these parties involved into single platform, and this platform act as a network which interlink the different parties. The registration department registers a new vehicle and the details will be stored in the database. Okay. Similarly, other parties also, for example, in the case of insurance companies issues the insurance and keeps the data in their single servers. But when it comes to the network, the entire data will be in this chain, and we can simply explain this scenario with an example. For example, we can we can give an example for describing this scenario. Like we have a vehicle registered in Kerala, for example, Kerala state, and travels to another state in India, for example, in Delhi or Maharashtra, etc. When we reach there, if a officer wants to verify the documents related to our vehicle.
Ajmal, I think the screen sharing has been stopped. Can you share the screen once more?
Okay, once.
I'm sorry for the technical issue.
Correct.
Yeah, we can see the screen.
Okay, so consider an example. As I said, we have a vehicle registered in Kerala. It travels to another state. The patrolling officer just want to access. They have access to the details associated with the vehicle registered in that particular state. For example, Karnataka. We can take Karnataka. They cannot access the details associated with the Kerala state. But if we have all the MVDs associated with the vehicles in the entire nation in one ledger or one distributed ledger, the patrolling officer from Karnataka can access the details with some restrictions to verify that the documents related to the vehicle is correct based on their informations that is published on this ledger. So similarly, we can create a network where some restricted peoples can access the details associated with the vehicles from different area in single one distributed single ledger, but cannot cannot change the data without the permission of the concerned node. Okay, so this is the scenario associated with this project. This is a simple POC. I'll just run the project. I'll be tunneling my local host so that we'll just use an ngrok application. We'll be getting an address. I'll share the address in the chat. Then you can access that address from your browsers and do the transactions into the blockchain. So I'll just run the application. After running the application, I'll just go through the different stages of creating the applications in an abstract level. I'll just describe the client side and the transaction processor side, and I'll just briefly explain the details associated with how a transaction should be bundled and should be sent, and how it should be interacting with the different transaction processors. So this is our project. So I'm using a Docker and a Docker Compose. Here, Docker is a container facility where we can run our entire project without installing natively. Docker Compose is the command in order to activate the different containers. You can see that creating each containers. VMS client is the client side of our project. Validator, REST API, VMS processor. VMS processor is our transaction processor side, and rest of the containers is given by this auto. Here we are using a JavaScript SDK in order to create this network. Now the chain is been initiated, and you can see that registration of government, registration of vehicle 1.0 succeeded. It is two type of transaction processes that is made in this project. Vehicle transaction processes deals with the business logic associated with the registration of the vehicle, insurance, police, pollution, etc. Whereas government registration is entirely handled by another transaction processor. So both of the transaction processor has been registered. So we can interact with this chain by going to the browser. From the localhost 3000 port, we can access the blockchain. So we have a homepage, a simple homepage, and we'll have the registration department. Okay, so we have private keys and public keys associated with this. So private key is a secure key, which is 64 hex characters. It will be used in order to send and sign the transactions to the transaction processors. So for example, I'll just do a transaction registering a vehicle in the registration department so that you can see the block created in the terminal in the blockchain. Okay. These are some of the sample private keys I have generated using this code. We can go to the validator bash and create as much number of private keys required, but I have already created it in order to just to show the transaction. We'll go with win number 1. So I'm going to do a transaction into the blockchain. Before that, I just want to show you that we can see the state. State is the ledger where this transaction is written in the localhost. You can see that only one address is created in this state. That is the address which is related to the settings TP. It is just registering the settings of the blockchain that has been created and made up. It is just, we can see the address created and the data associated with that. You can identify that the first six hex digits is zeros, which identifies the transaction family. I'll just give the details afterwards, but initially I'll be showing this application. After that we can go into detail. So this denotes the transaction family. So full zeros. By default it is associated with the settings TP. So coming back to the application, I'll do the transaction. Registration of the vehicle number 1 has been done successfully. You can see that the block has been created in the terminal. Block number 1 with value 1 has been registered in the blockchain. Now we can go back to the state and we can reload it. We can identify that a second address is created, which is this one, and the data stored in an encrypted manner in this address. This is the first block created. We can do multiple transactions and we can identify that the data that has been transacted has been written in this ledger. I'll go with second one. Second transaction done. We can reload the page. You can see that another transaction occurred and the data is stored in this address. Now when we come back and we try to register the vehicle with the same number, the transaction is blocked. The registration already exists because a vehicle has been registered. And when we go to the terminal, we can identify that multiple blocks has been created and an event is also generated. In the third transaction, we can identify that the registration already exists in this VIN number. That's why the transaction has not been succeeded. Now, similarly, we can access the insurance department, pollution department, police department, etc. In the case of registration department also, we have done another thing, which is an event generator. I'll just show that. If the vehicle belongs to a luxury category, we can filter that and we can generate an event. If the vehicle is in the luxury category, if it is BMW, etc., we have given a method to generate an event in order to notify it. BMW model event occurred. So in this way, we can also create specific events to notify while the transaction is going on. Okay. So if we reload the page, we can identify that each transaction gets added on in this state ledger. So if we want to get the details that is stored in the ledger, you can go to the view details page and just enter the VIN number and the private key. You can see the details that has been stored has been retrieved from the state and displayed on this page. So if anybody want to do a transaction, you guys can do from there. I'll just try that ngrok by tunneling my local host to that. I'll just try that and I'll just share the link in the chat. One second. So that you guys can transact, and those transactions will be listed in this state ledger. One second. I'm just tunneling my local hotspot to Anjura. This is an application which gives an address for just an instant. We can use this address to access the local host. Okay, so the same page came. I'll just share this address in the chat. If anybody wants to access the ledger, you guys can do from your browser. I've shared the link in the chat to everyone. If any volunteer coming, they can just access that link in your browser. And please just raise your hand or just notify before doing that, because I just want to open the terminal and I just want to share that. I'm just trying. Sometimes there will be technical issues, but let's just do that. Okay, so this is the terminal. So if anybody is accessing that page, just do a transaction. Okay, you guys need private keys also. I'll just share the private keys in the chat so that you can use that private keys. One second. So I've shared the private keys also in the chat. So just raise your hand or inform me that if you are doing any transactions. Anybody getting the address on your browser? Anybody getting this page? Any volunteers?
Sachin, they are waiting for private key.
Anybody able to do the transaction by using this address?
Ajmal, some participants are asking for the private key list.
Just go to your browser and access this address. You will get the home page. You can go to the registration department and use the private keys that has been pasted in the chat to everyone. You can use that and you can do the transaction. Just copy paste the private key in the private key section. Just enter a win number with 2 digits because some of the single digits have been used. You can just give any engine number, any model, some date, and you can do the transaction. Till now, I haven't received any
Ajmal,
transaction because when I reload the page,
Ajmal, can you share
number
the
of
private key?
addresses created still remains the same.
Ajmal, can I interrupt you? Hello.
Okay, fine. Then I'll do one more transaction and we'll just go to the details of the application. I'll do one transaction from the N0 address. Just go to the insurance department. We'll give the address, private key, type the win number.
Hello, Ajmal.
Do the transaction. Similarly, we can view the details. So, okay, I have got an information that somebody have some doubt regarding the private key. Can I talk to Mr. Jacob? Hello?
Yes, Ajmal. I think, am I audible now?
Hello?
Am I audible to you?
Jacob?
I'm speaking. Ajmal, am I audible? Dear participants, I think there is a technical issue. Kindly be patient. We'll resume soon.
Hello, Achmal. Hello, Achmal.
Yeah. Is it audible now?
Yeah,
Yes,
you are
yes, yes.
audible. Are we audible?
Yeah, fine. Actually, I was not hearing anything from your side. Sorry.
Okay. Jacob, please proceed. Please
Okay,
proceed.
fine.
Yeah, Ajmal, many of the participants are haven't received the private key. So could you
Okay.
please share the private key?
Yeah. Actually, I've posted it in the chat, private key. I'll just repost it.
Okay, fine.
Okay. So I was wondering why nobody is reacting to my questions. So I've shared the private key. Also, you can view the private key in the screen. Hello. Did you guys got the private key in the chat?
Yes, we have got.
Okay, fine. Okay. So now transactions are occurring. After posting a transaction, you guys can go to the vehicle details and just give the private keys and the VIN number, corresponding VIN number, so you can view the transaction that has been registered in the state. Okay, a lot of transactions. Okay, good. Anybody has any issues regarding doing the transaction? Just try to give different VIN numbers. Okay, if the VIN number does exist, it will not do the transaction, it will revert the transaction. Okay.
If you have any doubt, you can ask directly to Ajmal by unmuting your mics.
Again, one more thing I just want to notify is to go to the home page. Then from there we can see that on the right hand side we have two tabs: latest transaction ID and transaction receipt. So in this we can get the latest transaction ID, that is the last occurred transaction ID. So we can use that transaction ID. This will be the last transaction ID at present. Last transaction ID that has been written in the state. You can use that transaction ID and go to the transaction receipts tab, and you can view the transaction receipt by giving the transaction ID. Okay.
Sir,
Okay. So initial entry of vehicle.
Ajmal sir,
Yeah. Tell me. Hello.
sir, it's happening. It's working fine.
Okay.
Okay, sir. Sir, how to make this application using Sawtooth? If you give some
Yeah,
idea, then it
definitely.
should be fine, sir.
Yeah, definitely. I'll come to that. Before that, I just want to you guys to just to interact with the application initially, so that you'll when
Yes,
we
sir.
go to the application, then you will get some idea how this is done. So another thing I just want to notify you guys is that with a short time you cannot understand the entire, I mean, like not the entire, but a major part of the application. But today I'm just trying to give an abstract overview of how the application will be, how the application will be divided into separate sections. And from the GitHub code, I have a detailed document in my GitHub. You guys can go through that throughout that
Yes, sir.
documents. With that help you can start building the application on your own. Okay, so my primary aim is
Okay, sir.
to make you guys understand how this application will be, and I just want you all of you to practice how to build this application. Okay, so you guys can ask any doubt
Okay, sir.
regarding this application. So if
Okay, sir.
everybody have tried
And
to, yeah,
sir,
okay, tell me.
sir, also help us, sir. So suppose, sir, I want to be a blockchain developer. So
Yeah,
what are
definitely.
the skills and what are the different languages or database,
Yeah.
or what are the actually the skills or any certification we can do so that we can be a good developer like you, sir?
Yeah, okay, fine. So
Thank you, sir.
initially, you guys have to understand that this blockchain development, like traditionally in a full stack, we have the front end, the back end, and the database. Instead of this database, traditional databases, we use the blockchain database. Okay, so that is the primary difference from the normal stack and the blockchain stack. Okay, so we you guys can become a blockchain developer by specializing in any of the SDKs available. Like for example, you can go with the JavaScript. Today I have written, I'm showing this application which is done in the JavaScript SDK, but Python SDK is available. So initially you guys have to select one language in which you guys are comfortable. So for example, go with Python or JavaScript or Golang, etc. So then after that you guys can build applications. But one of the thing is that some people will be interested in developing private chains, closed environment, hyperledger sawtooth or hyperledger fabric applications. But another vast area is there which is dealing with public chains, which is more exciting when it comes to Ethereum, EOS, etc., etc. Okay, Bitcoin, etc. So I'll just go up. Once you guys have finished interacting with the application, then I'll do one thing. I'll just leave the server open itself. Then I'll go to the application details.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. The server will be running and the chain will be running. If anybody wants to interact, you guys can do the transactions. Okay. Okay, so basically this is the project VMS app. The project is done in the Docker container. As I said earlier, Docker is an environment or a container facility in which we can run the application in a closed environment, which will not be which will be separate from our traditional machine. Like, we can install as much features and applications that is required in a separate container, which will not be installed natively. For example, if we are running this chain in my specific system, I need to install this I need to run and install this chain in my PC, so that I have to install the Sawtooth natively. Instead of that, Sawtooth teams have created some Docker images which will be available in the Docker Hub. From there, we can pull that image for validators, for REST APIs, etc. And client image and processor image. We can run the application in a separate container. So I'm using the Docker for running this application. So once I have given the command docker compose down, initially I have done docker compose up in order to run the containers. Once I have given the docker compose down, the container get closed and the entire chain get closed, so it will not be affecting any applications in my native PC. Okay, so I'll just go to the application details. So we have two parts mainly, VMS client and VMS processor. Client is the part from where we'll fetch the details from the client side and bundle it as transactions, and we'll send that transaction into the blockchain. So once the transaction is sent to the blockchain, for example, like to the transaction processor, these transaction processors are smart contracts where we write the business logic. Okay, if we receive a transaction, if you receive a data, these transaction processors will be having the set of codes which defines that this data should be stored in this address. This data should be manipulated little bit and should be stored in this address, for example, like that. So transaction processors, in this transaction processors, will have two TPs. As I said earlier, we have vehicle handler and government handler. Vehicle handler deals with the registration department, insurance department, police department, and pollution, whereas government handler transaction processor deals with the government vehicle registration. For the demonstration purpose, we have created two transaction processors. Similarly, in the case of client side, we have different routers in order to render the page, and we have a user client where we'll be bundling the transactions into a batch, and this batch will be sent into the transaction processor via a REST API given by the Sawtooth itself. That REST API, actually we have accessed that earlier, this localhost state 8008 state. This is a REST API given by the Sawtooth team in order to view the state. I'll just go to the coding details. Okay, so I'm just opening a code editor, VS Code, Visual Studio Code. So we have two-side VMS client, VMS processor, and this Docker compose.yaml file is the file where we have written the details regarding different containers. Okay. Here you can see that VMS client has a container name VMS client, in which we'll be running the client side container. Then we have the VMS processor, container name is VMS processor, where we'll be running the transaction processors. Then we have a sawtooth REST API. Then we have the settings TP container. Then identity TP, which is related to sawtooth framework. Then we have the validators. Okay. So when it comes to VMS client, we have different routes. Initially, okay. So okay. So Hyperledger Sawtooth project transaction family. Okay. One of the important thing is that related to Sawtooth project is to understand what is transaction family. Okay. So it is nothing but transaction family consists of three parts: client, validator, and the transaction processor. And the state where the data is stored will be in the validator. Okay. So transaction family is just to designing a transaction family is just to identify whether the transaction belongs to which transaction family. When we go to browser, as I said earlier, we can identify that this first zeros, first six hex digit hexadecimal numbers is the transaction family. Okay. In the second address, you can identify that 6E1, E2, B5A is the transaction family name. You can see that in the another address also we have the same transaction family name 6E, 1E, 2B. Okay, so family is uniquely identified by its name and version. Okay, and a family contains a set of addresses. We have private keys and public keys. Private key, as we all use to initiate a transaction. This private key will be used to sign the transaction, and public key will be generated from the private key by using STTP algorithm. Okay. So this is the architecture of the Hyperledger Sawtooth. We have clients and intermediate REST API, which will through which we'll be communicating to the validator. This validator will be having more than one transaction processors where the business logic will be written. Then we will be having multiple validators, and these validators will be making the Sawtooth network. Clients interact with validator. Validator redirects that transactions to the transaction processors. Okay, so inside a block, we will be having batches. As I said, each batch will be having multiple transactions. I'll just go to the text code editor and I'll just show you afterwards how that transaction is bundled in a batch. This block will be having different batches. Each batch will be having different transactions, and this batch list will be sent to the transaction processors via REST API. Transactions bundled into batches, batch list will be sent. And this transaction will be having transaction headers. These transaction headers will be having the key associated with that batcher, who has signed the batch, who has signed the transaction, family name versions, inputs, outputs. Inputs and outputs are the addresses which a transaction can be accessed. Dependencies, if any dependencies is there, and the SHA of the hash of the payload. It might be little strange to get to these details, but I'll just go through this initially, and then I'll just briefly explain how to create an application by modifying the existing application. So through that, you will be able to get into the project with the shortcut. Okay. So these are batch headers and batches. Transaction headers again have some specific details, and then comes the address. Okay, so in the Hyperledger Sawtooth, each transaction data will be stored in a state corresponding to an address. It will be stored as a key value pair. Okay, this address will be a 35 byte address, which is 70 hex characters, and these 70 hex characters will be the address, and the value will be associated, the value associated to that address will be stored in the state as a key value pair. So when we give the address, we'll get the data. So by convention, as I told, that first 6 hex characters will be kept for naming the transaction family namespace. Then the rest of the characters can be divided and can be used for addressing scheme. So one of the important thing that we have to note in addressing scheme is that by giving the by dividing these 70 hex characters into different parts, we can access the whole data. For example, if we are designing the addressing scheme in a specific way, I'll just show in the code that, for example, if we are omitting the last 6 hex digits by giving the 64 rest of the 64 hex digits, we'll get the entire data under that key. For example, if you are registering 10 vehicles, 10 vehicles, and if you are giving the just giving the family name only, we'll get the entire details under this family name. If you are giving the entire address, then we'll get the details regarding that specific vehicle only. If we are giving only the family name, then we will be getting the entire vehicles details under that family name. So that's why this addressing scheme is very important. We have to understand how should we have to think how based upon our project, how we can design this address so that we can easily retrieve the data. Okay, then this already told you that TP transaction family is uniquely identified. Okay, these are the private keys. Okay, then we come to material. I'll just shift to the code section. We'll go. So basically, you guys have to do one thing. Initially, you have to clone this project. I have a event management Sawtooth project in my GitHub. You can clone that project, and instead of entirely changing the project, you can just change the theme of the project based upon your application. So basic outline will be like this itself: VMS client, VMS processor, and a Docker Compose YAML file will be there. Then in the VMS client, you can go to the router. We'll be having an index.js file where you will be getting the details regarding each route. So you guys can edit these routes based upon number of routes you wanted. Here we have registration page, insurance page, pollution page, police page, etc. Then while accessing that route, it will be rendering that page. Each page is written in the use section. Here we have used an HBS template engine in order to write the page. Go with insurance. Okay, it is just a simple page with a form which will be taking the private key, VIN number, insurance amount, etc. And this data will be transferred into the transaction bundling page, which is in the user client section. So once the data has been received in the form, we'll just send the data to the user client section through index.js page. we'll be receiving the data that is associated with each page here. When it comes to / registration, we have the private key, vehicle number, VIN number, then model, etc., etc. And this entire data will be sent to the add registration function, which is in the user client.js page. You can trigger this function from here. User client.js is the file in which we'll be creating the address, vehicle address, in which the data will be stored, and transaction bundling also. Once the data, that function, add registration function, has been triggered in the index.js page, you can see that function here. Here we have two family names. One is vehicle, regarding the family vehicle TP, transaction processor. Then we have the government family name, which is related to the government TP. This add registration function will be triggered from that page. Inside that, we will trigger the vehicle address function, where we will be creating an address. After creating that address, the payload will be having the data regarding that vehicles, and then we'll check whether the address, here we are creating this address in order to check whether if there exists any data in this address. So once we get that there is no data in this address, we will be triggering this create transaction function. So before that, I'll just go to the address creation function, vehicle address. This is the vehicle address function. Here we will be inputting the private key and the VIN number that we have entered in the page. We'll be getting that private key and the VIN number here, and we'll just create a public key by using the private key. By the STTP to this K1 algorithm, we can convert the private key to the public key, because while creating an address, this address can be seen by everybody in the state. You guys know that, right? In the browser, we can see the address. So if we give the private key data here, it will be not suitable. So we'll be converting this private key into a public key, and this public key will be hashed. And after hashing that, we'll take 6 characters from the key hash, 58 characters from the key hash, 6 characters by hashing the VIN number, and 6 characters from the family name. Family name is vehicle. So by combining these 6 plus 58, total 70, we'll be creating the address. After creating this address will be returned to this function when this function is evoked here. So we'll be getting, when we access this function, we'll be getting that address here. Then we'll just initialize action as add registration, etc., and payload as the details that we got from the user input. We'll join it, and after that, we'll just give this address here to check whether in the state whether this address exists or not. If it does not exist, we can understand that there is no such vehicle registered. So we'll go to the next function, and we'll trigger the create transaction function, and we'll be inputting family name, which is vehicle, list of addresses, that is the address here created here, and the data one, and the payload. Then create transaction is the function where we'll be creating this transaction into bundles of batches, and this batch will be sent to the transaction processor. So this create transaction function and all has a standard structure. So the only thing while creating an application initially, is just to understand the flow of the code pattern and just to alter the code according to our project. So after triggering the create transaction will be triggered here. Create transaction, and that inputted family name, input address list, output address list, private key will be received here. From there, we'll again create the signer using the private key, and STTP to this K1 algorithm will be creating the public key, which is initialized as signer. And with this public key, we'll be signing the transaction. In order to sign the transaction, we have just taken the private key to here and converted that private key to public key, and we have created the signer. Then we have the payload bytes. Payload will be encoded, and this payload bytes and signing will be given into the transaction header bytes, and we'll just encode the transaction also. And this transaction will be number of transaction. In our case, we have only one transaction inside one batch, but we have possibilities in order to input multiple transactions in one batch. Okay. So this transaction will be put into the batch, and this batch again will be signed by the signer, and this batch will be put into batch list, and this encoded batch data will be sent into the transaction processor via REST API. So from here, send transaction function will be triggered, and then transaction will be sent into the transaction processor via REST API. So this is the send transaction function. Here we will receive the batch list that we have created by ordering the transactions, and then we'll post these batch list into the REST API port 8008/batches. These are the framework given by the sawtooth structure. We just need to follow this pattern in order to post the transaction. Once the transaction has been sent to the batches endpoint, the client part is over. Then we have to go to the transaction processor side, where we'll receive this transaction and we'll do some manipulation if required, and we'll be creating address there also, and the same address from which the transaction has been sent, and we'll be storing these details, this data in that specific address. So now we are going to VMS processor side, where we have two transaction processor, that is vehicle handler and government handler. Then we have a VMS processor where we will be initializing these multiple TPs. So if we have more than one TPs, we will be initializing here. We'll be adding it to the transaction processor list. So when we go to vehicle handler.js, where we'll be handling the registration, insurance, police, etc., we'll be receiving the transaction that has been sent from the client side in this class, vehicle handler. So initially, when we register the transaction, register the transaction processor, we'll be initializing the family name and version also. So once we get the transaction, we'll get the context and the transaction processor request from that transaction. From the transaction processor request, we can get the payload, and from the transaction processor request, we can get the signer public key also. So without transferring the key, we'll get the key from the transaction processor request itself. I'll just tell why we are using this key here, because in order to create the address here, we require family name, VIN number, and key. VIN number will be consisted inside the transaction that has been sent here in the payload. From the transaction process request, we'll get the public key, and then from the payload received, we'll take the first element of the payload, which will be action, and we'll check that whether the action is add registration. So if it is add registration, then we'll trigger the function registration, and we'll input the data that we have received in the payload. Then we'll trigger the registration function, then it will goes to the registration. Okay, here. So we'll be getting the VIN number, engine number, model, date, and the public key here. From there, we'll be creating the vehicle address by triggering the vehicle data address. We'll be getting the vehicle detail. We'll be putting the VIN number, engine number, model, and date here. And then we'll trigger the get state function. In order, we are checking here also whether the address already exists or not. If the address exists, we'll give the output as the data already exists. If it does not exist, we'll write the data in that specific newly created address. So as said earlier, in the client side, similarly we'll be creating the vehicle address here also, vehicle data address, by hashing the family name vehicle and taking the last 6 characters, hashing the VIN number and taking the last 6 characters, then hashing the public key, putting the last 58 character. Together we have 70 hex characters. We'll be creating the address. From here, checking whether the vehicle address already exists or not, and bundling the vehicle details, we'll trigger the write to store function in order to write the vehicle details in that vehicle specific address. This is the write to store function. This is the write to store function. We have separate write to store functions for police and other departments, because in the case of police department, we have to append the data. Like if in the case of other vehicle registration, if the VIN number already exists, we'll not be able to add the another vehicle in the same VIN number. But in the case of police department, the same vehicle will be having multiple violation of rules cases, etc., etc. So in the case of police, we have to add more data in single VIN number. So we have different write to store for police and different write to store for other registration, insurance, etc., etc. Then we'll access the write to store function. From there, we'll generate an event, word match event, from which we'll be identifying the luxury vehicles, for example, like BMW, etc., etc. And that event will be triggered here. Whether the event is triggered or not, this data will be encoded, and this receipt will be generated here. This receipt will be available once we give the transaction ID. We can get the transaction receipt data, and then finally this data associated with that address will be written in the state. This is the cycle of events that is going on in the transaction processor side. So now the transaction has been written in the state. Coming back to VMS client, this is where we can view the data, / state route. Here we will be giving the private key and the VIN number. So at that time, we'll access the result function user client. Okay. So in the case of viewing the data, there is no need to go through the transaction processor. Only when we write the data, we need to send the transaction to the transaction processor, and the data and the addressing scheme will be created, and the data will be stored to the corresponding address. In the case of viewing the data, we just need to query to the REST API 8008/state port, and we have to just give the address here. So in the result function, again, we will be receiving the private key and the VIN number, two data, data 1 and data 2. We will be creating the vehicle address by giving the private key and the VIN number. From the private key will be converted to public key, and we will be creating that address, and that created address will be appended to this REST API port /state, and by giving this, we'll be able to get the data associated with that address. By fetching that data, we'll get a response from there, and data will be obtained. If there is no data in that address, we'll get that there is no data. But if there is data, we'll get the data, and we'll use a base64 decoder in order to obtain the encoded data, and the data will be received in the front end. This is the pattern to write a transaction and to read a transaction in this application. So basically, we have to understand that we have two parts, client side and the processor side. And in the case of Docker, you guys can do without Docker also. You can natively install the sorted, but I'll recommend using a Docker container initially, so that once we have any problem, it will not affect our native PC. You can just clean the containers and can start the chain newly. So PMS client, processor, compose file, client side, where we will be building the transactions, we'll be bundling the transactions, we'll be signing the transaction, and then in the processor side, where we'll receive this transaction, create the address, and store the transaction data in the specific address. So these are the two main parts. By going through the documents and docs associated with the event management project in my GitHub, and also going through the code pattern, how the flow is coming, you can understand, and you can just make some changes in this application by changing theme, changing any reducing different pages or creating new address, etc., etc. Then you can try to run the application from a different pattern. So in the case of sawtooth application, I think I have covered the different sides related to the project. And another thing is that the basic theme of this project, I just want to explain it once more. We have different MVDs associated, with the different vehicle departments of each state. All these MVDs, motor vehicle departments, comes under one network, which will be handling registration, and insurance companies will also be there in that network. Pollution certifying authorities will be there, and the traffic department of police also will be there associated in this network, so that the entire data associated with the entire vehicles comes under one distributed ledger, with each department has control over their data, and nobody can alter the data associated with the vehicle, and These parties with mutual consensus can come into a specific pattern where different parties can view the data based upon certain restrictions in order to verify whether the data associated with the vehicle is authentic or not. So these are the points related to this vehicle management system application. I think you guys got a brief idea. I know it's little bit more, but I think you guys got a brief idea. If anybody have any doubt associated with this, can ask. After that, we can move to the Remix IDE, which is an online development environment. From there, we can run the Ganesh simulator in our PC and can communicate from that online IDE to the Ganesh. Anybody have any doubts or anything? Just need to repeat it in any section. Anybody has any doubts or anything just to clear?
Participants, if you have any doubt, you can ask directly to Ajmal by unmuting your mics.
Okay, then I'll just close the application and I'll just run the application once more. And when you clone the project from the GitHub link or any other source, you just need to give some simple commands in order to make the project run. So I'll just show how the application is closed and again running into a full scale. I'll just show that. So I'm just bringing down my containers. You just have to give Control C in order to stop the containers. After bringing down the containers, we have to give the command docker compose down. If anybody is using Ubuntu, you have to add sudo docker compose up in order to run the containers. Now I have brought down the containers and you can see that we'll be losing. Okay. So we have lost the page. Application is closed. I'll try to bring up the container. After downloading the project, we have to go to the path of that project and go to the terminal. Then give the command docker -compose up in order to bring up the project. Initially, when we run the project, it will take some time because in order to pull the images from the Docker Hub. But once we have done one time, then each time the project will be up in few minutes. I think the project has okay. Okay, again. Okay, done. Now I'm just bringing down the project once more. Okay. Now we have the Ethereum project. In the case of Ethereum, we have a simple DApp where we'll be creating a private Ethereum network. In the case of Ethereum, we have public chains and private chains. This is just an DApp in order to connect students, educators, and service providers related to education into a single platform. We have written some smart contracts in Solidity, and these smart contracts will be deployed into the Ethereum private chain. And this is a project related to students scholarship, which I and Mr. Dr. Jubilant together have created this project. And this will be a simple project where students details will be registered by a node, that is the education department of each district will be a node in this network. We'll just take a Kerala state, for example. We have 14 districts, and each educational head, department head in each district will be acting as a node, and we'll be creating a network, and students under each district will be student details under each district will be registered into this network with their corresponding income and their marks details. Based on that, you will be able to based on that we'll be able to generate a scholarship, and this scholarship will be transferred to the students as tokens, ERC20 tokens, so that the scholarship amount will not be used for any other purposes. Generally, when scholarship is awarded, the scholarship amount will not be used for the same purpose that we are intending to give to the students. These scholarships will be awarded to the students as tokens, so that these tokens can be exchanged through educational related goods or any other things that is that can be tracked by the government. So the scholarship amount that is given to the students can be tracked whether they are using these tokens for the educational purpose or any other separate purpose. So I hope that you guys have installed the Ganache. You can install the Ganache by going to Trufflesuit. Just go to Trufflesuit and you will be getting Ganache from there. Just go download the Windows version and just install it. You will get Ganache GUI. Also, you can install Ganache by, if you have Node.js and npm package manager in your system, you can just type npm install -g Ganache -cli in order to install the CLI version of Ganache. You can choose any method, but try to install GUI initially so that you can just view the transactions in a better manner to understand how the transaction list is generated in the Ganache when interacting with a smart contract. So I'll be running the Ganache. Ganache is a blockchain simulator, an Ethereum based blockchain simulator where we can deploy the smart contracts, and we use Remix IDE in order to write smart contracts, and just we'll deploy that smart contracts from the Remix to this Ganache blockchain simulator, and we can interact with the smart contract. So just give quick start. It will run the Ganache simulator. Okay, so here we have, by default, Ganache gives us 10 addresses with 100 ethers balance. In the case of Ethereum, we need ethers in order to do the transaction. We have to pay a specific amount of ether, a small amount of gas fee. I'll just come into that. And while doing the transaction, we have to pay the gas fee. And here we have the 10 accounts by default. We can use these accounts in order to interact with the smart contract. Number of blocks created is 0. Transaction list, no transactions occurred. And understand that the port here is 7545. In the case of GUI, we'll be having a localhost port with 7545, but in the case of Ganesh CLI command line Ganesh will be having 8545. So we can go to the browser and we can go to the remix page, remix.ethereum.org. Understand that it should be not secure page like http /remix.ethereum.org. If it is https, you will not be able, you will get the remix page, but you will not be able to connect. There is some issues. So I'll just paste the link to the chat. Okay, so I'm getting some questions in the chat. Okay, so I'll just come into that afterwards. Okay, please excuse me. I'll just finish my um, demonstration on application, and after that I'll come to the chat. I've pasted a link in the chat for everyone, http://remix.ethereum.org. You can access that link and come to the Remix platform. Who all are going along with me can come to that link. Once you have downloaded the Ganesh, you can run it by simply just clicking the quick start, and then after that come to the browser, access the remix page. By default you will be having three contracts.
Ajmal, sorry for interrupting. Are you sharing your screen?
One second.
Okay.
Okay, fine. Sorry. So after running the Ganesh, you guys can come to the remix page, and by default you will be having three contracts here. In that, just go to the first contract, storage.sol. So .sol is the Solidity extension. Here the contracts will be written in Solidity language. So by default, in order to test, Remix will be giving three contracts. Just don't look these contracts. These are the contracts that I have imported into this Remix ID. You will be having storage.sol, owner.sol, ballot.sol. We'll go with the storage.sol. It is just a simple storage contract in order to store a number and to retrieve it. We can deploy this contract into the Ganesh, and we can interact with this contract so that we can see the transactions occurred in this contract in the Ganesh simulator. So here we have initially this contract will be, so if the first line gives the pragma solidity, it is the version. So we have to compile this contract, so that you have to select this compiler. It is compiling, the contract is compiling. So when we go to this page, deploy and run transaction, we have the JavaScript VM initially, and we have to go to the Web3 provider where we'll be connecting with the Ganache. When we go to Web3 provider, we have to change the port from 8545 to 7545. People having Ganache GUI, it should go to 7545. Whoever installed Ganache in the command line can go with 8545 itself. So I'm using the GUI version. So I'm just changing it to 7545. So you can see that by default Ganache gives us 10 addresses with 100 ethers. Now we have connected with that network. We can see that same 10 addresses here with 100 ethers. We can use these to deploy these addresses with ethers to deploy this contract into the Ganache. Let me see that the contract is not getting compiled. I don't know.
Participants can post the questions explicitly to the group, to everyone channel, so that the presenter can also see. Thank you. Ajmal, Ms. Divya James is telling that she is not getting the contract compiled.
Yeah, 1 second. I have the same issue. I'm just checking. Is it showing any error? The thing is that you will be having the compiler version here. So here we have a 0.4.22 and between 0.4.22 and 0.7.0. So go to this tab on the left side and select the compiler version here. You will be having a compiler version here, and you can go and change that version, something between 4.22 and 0.7.0. You can select 0.5.16, etc. Then you will get the compiled contract. I'm getting some error. I'll just fix it once. Okay, so we'll be having a page like this. Okay, so I have the first contract. The contract is compiled. As I told you, here we have the option to select the compiler version. So I have selected 0.6.6, and something between 4.22 or 0.7 you can select it. And here we will be having the compiled contract. And when we go to this third tab, you will be having this contract here, compiled contract here, and here now we are in the JavaScript VM. Okay, so as I said earlier, we have to connect to the Ganache. Go here and change to 7545 and connect to Ganache. After connecting, you will be getting these 10 addresses here. The first addresses ends with C06E. Just to make sure, we can go here, C06E. Okay, fine. So we have the 10 addresses here. We have the compiled contract. Now we will be selecting the first address and we'll be selecting this tab in order to deploy the contract. Before deploying, select this one. Make sure the selected contract is storage, and we'll be deploying to the Ganache. You will receive a tick here, green tick here in the terminal, which means your transaction has been successfully written and block 1 is created. You can go to the Ganache and check whether in the blocks you will see one block is created, and you can go to the transactions. You can identify that a contract has been created. Now we can interact with this contract which is written in the Ganache. We can see that we have one transaction, one block. Okay, then we can interact with this contract by going down here. You can access the contract. You can store a number. Transaction done, block 2 created. You can see in the terminal the green tick has come here, block 2 created. You can also view the stored number by clicking the retrieve tab. You can see this, we got the stored 10, and in the terminal we can see that a call has came here. Here no transaction occurs, which means that whenever we write a data, we'll do it as a transaction. But in order to view data, we don't need to spend either, or we don't need to do a transaction. We can view the data from the chain anytime without spending the gas fee. But when we write transaction, we have to spend a specific amount of either as a gas fee in order to write in the chain. When we go to the Ganache, we can see that another block is created and the gas used is this much amount. This is the transaction hash. You can see in the transactions, initial transaction was a contract creation, but the second transaction is the contract call. Also, we can see when we go to the logs, we can see the CLI version of the Ganache. You can see the logs. Here we can see the contract created. Here is the initial transaction where contract is created. This is the contract address. We can use this contract address and the ABI of this contract. Both can be used, and an instance of contract can be created and can be used in applications in order to interact with that. Same as we have done in the Sawtooth application, we can create a client side for this, and we can use this contract address as well as the contract ABI. Contract ABI will be available here. This is where we'll get the contract ABI. Then we'll get the contract address, and we can access the contract which is deployed in the chain from creating a client application. So what was the problem earlier? Excuse me. Somebody has some issues with the remix, right? Is it clear?
Yeah, the one participant had an issue. Can you please unmute yourself and raise your concern, please?
When we type the number and press the transact button, it
Okay.
is showing one error. Both receive and fallback functions are not defined in remix ID.
Have you gone to STTP?
Sorry.
In the address, have you given the link STTP or STTPS?
It's HTTP.
Okay, when it comes with STTPS, this kind of issues rise, but when it comes to STTP, usually.
Oh, I think it's HTTPS. Okay, let me change it first.
Okay, fine. Because when we select this link from the Google page, you will be directed to STTPS. You have to you have to hard code it HTTP // remix.ethereum.org.
Yeah, let me try once again.
Anybody have any more issues? Okay, I'll do one more transaction. Another transaction done. We can view the value here. We can do as many calls we want, but we don't need to pay either, or like we don't need to give the gas fee. You can see that in this accounts, in the blocks, another block is created and the amount of gas we use. And in the transaction, you can see that another contract call, and we have registered, done another contract call, a transaction has been done. You can see here in the accounts, the first account has been doing the transaction and the balance has reduced from 100 ethers to 99.99674140. Similarly, we can use other addresses also in order to do the transaction. So this is the case of storing a number and retrieving it using a simple Solidity smart contract. And when it comes to another project, that student scholarship project, we'll be having 4 smart contracts. Okay, so some of the participants are raising hands. If anybody have any issues, you guys can just unmute and ask me directly. I'll try to help.
So what's the meaning of that button named transact below? I mean, in Remix ID, you can see one button named transact, right?
Where here deploy or okay.
No.
Yeah,
Below.
transact. Yeah, okay. So there, this is the initiation of the transaction. Transact means we are going to do a transaction to the contract. Okay.
Okay, below that, low level interactions, and there you can see one transact.
Yeah,
I mean,
that is another transact, like call data interactions. It is not related to this transaction.
okay, because whenever we try to insert a number, when I try to insert a number and when I click on store,
okay,
the blocks are getting created, but
okay.
again that error, both the receive and fallback functions are not defined. It is being shown below that call data.
Okay, so that is the place where we will be getting the error. That's
Okay,
why
so
it is shown there. But the thing is that, have you done this, like when you selected that storage,
okay,
you have inserted directly that number in that store, or have you done like this?
no, directly.
No, you have to do this.
Oh,
Are
clicking the
you
drop
seeing
down.
this?
Okay,
Yeah, you have to click that drop down and you
okay,
have to enter it. Just try it
okay,
like that.
okay. But even then the blocks are getting created. There's no issue in that because it is shown in the Ganache.
Okay, then
But
what is the error shown?
error is the same thing.
You are getting that green tick.
Yeah, I'm getting the green tick.
Okay, so you are you are able to retrieve the data by
I am able to retrieve the data also.
Then what is the error shown there then?
That both receive and fallback functions are not defined. That is same as before. Let me try as you mentioned by clicking on the drop down.
So the thing is that sometimes certain issues will be there depending upon that, but you are able to write it, right?
Yeah, I am able to. I mean, the blocks are getting created. There is no issue with that.
There is okay, fine. Then just avoid it.
Okay. Thank you, sir.
Excuse me, sir.
Yeah, tell me, please.
In all transactions, it shows that gas used okay. Value is 0 for all transactions.
Yeah, okay, fine. Where in the Ganesh, right?
Yes, sir.
Here, okay. So that is not the value associated with this gas, okay? That is another value, the data value inside it. That's why it is showing 0. So the gas has no specific units, okay? 26,446 is the gas. Gas itself is the gas unit, okay?
Okay.
So for example, we'll be giving a specific gas price for each unit of gas. You can see a amount on top left after current block, 2000000, etc. Are you seeing it?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so that is the gas price. So what these guys are doing is that they are fixing a gas price and a certain amount of gas limit, that a block can contain. This is done because if somebody is intentionally trying to do certain amount of transaction repeatedly into a network, the network becomes congested, right? If triggering a transaction one by one after in a specific manner, some it is called DDoS attack. Like it is just an attack to that network. In order to avoid that kind of attack, a gas price system is introduced, so that while doing a transaction we have to pay either a certain amount of either. So if somebody is trying to congest the network by triggering a certain huge amount of transaction repeatedly, he have to pay the price, right? So in such case, that's why this gas price and gas system is introduced, so that only the authentic user will be triggering the transaction to the public chain, okay, into the blockchain.
Sir, thank you, sir.
Okay. Anybody else have any issues regarding doing the transaction? Okay, then I'll just move to that scholarship project. In the case of student scholarship, as I told you that student details will be stored then by each node, then that student details, based upon the student details, a scholarship will be awarded to that student, and the scholarship will be transferred to the student as tokens. We have written a token contract and several other smart contracts. The student scholarship project has 4 smart contracts, which is a scholarship contract, then scholarship token contract, finance contract, and income contract. I'll just show that. This is the scholarship token contract, and we'll be having a token named scholar, and these tokens will be given to the students. And the scholarship this we have written these contracts. We can write these contracts, different contracts, in the same file itself, but we have written these contracts in different files in order to maintain the modularity. So from scholarship token, we'll go to finance contract. Here we'll be entering the student income. Then in the merit contract, we'll be entering the student marks of different marks obtained by the student. And finally, we'll be having the scholarship contract. In this scholarship contract, will be having the details of the student, and this scholarship contract will be generating the scholarship awarded to the student, and these scholarship tokens awarded to students will be transferred to the students account. So before deploying, we have to change the compiler because we have the version 0.6 here. We'll go with 5.16, and we'll just check whether, okay, so compiled. So since we have 4 contracts and each contract is linked to another contract, I'll just show the path. We have the scholarship token contract here. Then we have the finance contract, then merit contract. Okay. So in the merit contract, you can see that contract merit is scholarship token. So we have inherited that scholarship token contract to merit contract. In the finance contract, we have inherited the merit contract to the finance. So here we will get the scholarship token contract as well as the merit contract. And finally, in the scholarship.sol, we have inherited the finance here. So which means we will get the merit as well as scholarship token contract in this final scholarship contract. So we will be deploying the final scholarship contract into the Ganesh. So we have set the version, we got the compiled contract. We'll be selecting the scholarship contract and we'll be trying to deploy to the Ganesh. Deployed, and 4th block created here, got the green tick. We'll just confirm it by going to the Ganesh. Fourth block created, 1 transaction occurred. Transactions list, when we go to the transaction list, we can see that another contract creation occurred. This is the address of the contract. Now we can interact with that contract. Initially, we have to minimize this storage contract and we'll be accessing the scholarship contract. Here we have to understand that we have certain set of restrictions made in this contract. The contract has been deployed by the first address. So in this, certain functions, that is student registering details, student marks, etc., can be accessed only by the address from which the contract is deployed. So in our case, the first address is from which we have deployed the contract. So we have to select the first address itself in order to access the register function. Select the drop down and I have to copy that address. So we'll consider the second address as a student and we'll select that, we'll copy it. Again, change to the first address because only the first address, that is the address from which the contract is registered, can only access that register function. We have to paste it. We have to give one name. We have to fill the form and do the transaction. Transaction successfully done. You can see that block 5 created. We can go to the transaction list and a contract call occurred. And we can confirm that fifth block is created in the transaction, a contract call occurred. So the student with that address has been registered with that details. Again, we have to copy the student address and change to the main address, contract get address, and then go to the enter marks function in order to enter the marks. Again, we can do the transaction. Transaction done successfully. Block 6 created. Similarly, we can go to income function. We can give the address here, student address. We can give an income. We can do the transaction. Block 7 created. Then we can go to the get details tab, click the drop down, give the student address, and we can call it. We can see that we got the registered details here, name, SAS, etc., the total marks, then the income, then we got the number of tokens that has to be given to the student, that is the fifth one. So 10,000 tokens. So again, token transfer can only be done by the contract deployed address. So in order to transfer the token, we can use the transfer function where we can give the to address and the tokens. So again, we have to go and select the second address, which is the student address, then change to first address from which the transaction should be done. Then we have to go to the transfer function and give the student address, that is the second address here. 10,000 is the token awarded to that student, and we have to do the transaction. Transaction done successful. Block 8 created. Then we can go to balance of function, where we can see that if we give the address of the student, we can see he has 10,000 balance. We can just check with another address, with the third address, which we can consider as another student who didn't get any scholarship. Change to first function. Then go and just check the balance. We can see the balance is 0. So the third address has 0 balance. The second address has 10,000 balance. This way we can interact with these contracts. You can see that finance and merit and token, etc. are different contracts, but has been inherited to the scholarship contract, and only the scholarship contract has been deployed. You will get the smart contracts from my GitHub link. You can download the smart contracts from the GitHub and can add these smart contracts into the remix by using this option, and you can import these contracts to the remix IDE, and you can run the Ganache and can deploy this contract as I have done here, and can interact with these contracts. We can just go to Ganache again. We have so many transactions done. We can see that 8 blocks created, transactions here, contract call. These are the transaction of registering student, registering marks, income, and finally transferring the token to that student. Similarly, we can interact with these contracts. Anybody has any doubts regarding this?
Sir,
Hello?
hello, able to hear me, sir?
Yeah. Tell me.
Sir, the final contract which has been invoked actually derived from all other contracts.
Yeah.
My question is it possible to have all the contracts in a single .sol file itself?
Yeah, it is possible. You can I have done in several files in order to get some modularity, just to make it in a standard structure.
Yes, sir.
You can write each contract on the same file itself by inheriting.
Yes, sir. As you said, that will not be that much easy for understanding if
Yeah,
you
yeah.
paste all the contacts in a single file.
Yeah.
So, in that case, suppose if I haven't in several separate files, is it possible to include that?
Include what?
Include means like in C++ and all, we use hash include to attach other file here, right?
No, the thing is that if you guys have several files, by inheriting, you will get the entire features and facilities of that contract into the inherited contract. The
So that means
inherited,
only single contract can be executed. So
yeah, but the thing is that you can just deploy separate contracts to the Ganesh simulator. I'll just show that. Okay, in the case in here, you can just deploy the finance contract, merit contract separately to the blockchain and can interact with that. But the only thing is that you will be able to use the functionalities which is inside the finance contract only. Okay.
yes, sir.
So if you are deploying the finance contract, you will be able to, in our case, if you are deploying the finance contract, you will be able to get the features of that finance contract as well as merit contract, because it is inherited to finance. Okay.
Yes,
You
yes,
will
sir.
be able to get the scholarship token also, but you will not be able to get the final contract scholarship features in that. So we'll use the final contract which has all the above contracts inherited to be deployed in the chain, so that we'll get the entire features.
Okay, sir.
You
Thank you, sir.
can write the whole contract on the same file itself, no problem.
Yes, sir. Thank you, sir.
Okay, welcome. I'll just show the GitHub link so that if anybody wants to download the contracts, you can just, or else you can just access that link and just copy and paste the code to the remix. it will be available. Symbol storage, smart contract, or Ethereum project series will be there in my GitHub. You guys can just take it. Symbol storage is not the project. You'll be having another project like Ethereum 3s. Inside that, you will be having a smart contract directory. Inside that, you will be available. You will get the 4 contracts. You can just copy and create a new file in this remix IDE and just paste that contracts. In this, you will go to Ethereum project 3s. You will be having a smart contract folder. You will get these contracts from here. No need to download. You can just go to the contract, just copy the code. After copying, come back to remix. Just start a new file and name a contract name similar to that copied contract and just paste it there. Do it for the 4 contracts. And one of the issues you will be facing is that by default you will be getting a compiler with around 7.1 or 6.12, but each contract will be under the version 0.4 to 0.6. So just change it to 5.16. Then usually your contract will be compiled, and then you can deploy that contract by selecting here. By default, you will be having finance here. Just make sure it is changed to scholarship, and you can deploy it to Ganesh.
Sir, if possible, can you once again say the steps that we have to do?
Okay, so anybody has any issues?
Sir, can you once again say those steps? I mean, not copy and creating the smart contract,
okay,
but
fine.
the other one. Yeah.
Okay. Which one?
I mean, creating the. I mean, you just now deployed this contracts.
Yeah.
And
Okay.
blocks,
Okay.
right?
So you have copied that contract from the.
No, I have not copied, but I would like to see that once again.
Okay, fine. Yeah. I'll do the cycle. I'll go with the symbol storage. Okay.
Okay.
Okay. So I'm going to delete those 2 contracts. I'll be selecting this. Okay, so from the beginning, I'll just start from the beginning. Okay, so initially we have to start the Ganesh. After that, we have to go to the remix.ethereum.org remix ID. In the Ganesh, you have to get the quick start. By default, you will be getting 10 accounts with 100 ethers balance. And make sure that the port with Ganesh GUI is 7545. Usually by default Ganesh CLI is 8545. So while connecting, you can see that by default it will be showing 8545. We have to change it to 7545. We have to change it in the remix, not here. Here it is 7545 itself. Okay, fine. Then after that we'll be taking the storage.source contract. This is a simple contract just to write a number and to retrieve it. Then we'll go to the compiler section. Make sure the compiler fits to the version of the contract. You will be getting the version here. You will be seeing the version here. It should be something between 4.22 or 0.7. So here we have the compiler 5.16, which is okay. We got the green tick, which means that the contract is compiled. Then we go to the deploy and run transaction section. Here by default it will be in the JavaScript VM section. This is another method. Without connecting the Ganesh also we can deploy the contract. Okay, so if it is in JavaScript VM, this is just to test the contract. Remix have given another option. Here we can just deploy it. But in our case, we are dealing with the Ganesh blockchain simulator. So we'll be connecting to that by selecting the option Web3 provider. Web3 provider. So at that time, it will be showing at the endpoint as 8545, because usually the Ganesh CLI command line Ganesh will be in the 8545 port. But I'll just show that also. But in this case, we are using the GUI Ganesh. So I'm changing it to 7545. I'm trying to connect it. So in order to make sure that the connection has been done, here we will get that custom 5777 network connected. Okay, fine. We'll be having 10 accounts with 100 ethers each. So just to make sure, you just have to check the address 49AC4. 49AC4 is the first address. So okay, fine. So we got these 10 addresses there, which means that the remix has been connected to the Ganesh. Now we have to deploy the contract. We have to select the storage contract here, which is already compiled. That's why we got the green tick here. We'll be deploying that. Once we have deployed, we can see in the terminal of the remix bottom side, we can see that green tick, block 1 is created and the transaction is successful. We can go to Ganesh, make sure that blocks has been created. We can select the blocks. We can see that block 1 is created. We can go to the transactions. We can see that transaction list, a contract creation call has been, the transaction has been done. So this is the contract address. Again, we can interact with the deployed contract. Here is the deployed contract. We can access it by clicking the drop down. We have to input a symbol number. Transaction done. Block 2 created in the terminal bottom side. You can see that block 2 created. We can go to the Ganesh. You can see that contract call, the transaction has been done in the transaction list. Again, coming to remix, by calling that, retrieving it, we can see that the registered date is obtained here, registered number is obtained here. A contract call has been done. You can see in the terminal, a contract call is done here. This is the single cycle to connect the Ganesh to the Remix online IDE and to deploy a contract into the Ganesh blockchain simulator. Anybody
So you
has any doubt?
mentioned something about when you deployed the scholarship, that student scholarship contracts and all. You mentioned that it is possible only by using the same address, something like that.
Yeah.
Can
Oh,
you?
that is specific to that contract. That is, in the case of scholarship, I'll just explain that.
Yeah.
In this case of in the case of scholarship, we have 4 contracts. Okay, scholarship token contract, finance merit, and scholarship soul. The thing is that only the address from which the contract is deployed can only register the details of the student. That is some restriction specifically that we have written in that contract. Due to that restriction only, in that case, that contract, that function can be accessed by that specific address. That is done in order to restrict that. If everybody is able to enter the details of the student, it means that it is not okay, right? Only the specific node who is controlling that district can enter the details of the student as well as the income and also the marks of the students. But every student has the right to view the scholarship awarded. He can give his address and can view how much scholarship it is awarded to him. And another thing is that he has also the right to transfer the tokens from his account to another person's account. For example, a bookstore which supplies books, which is recognized by the government, those people can get these tokens from the students and give the books, and these tokens will be converted to fiat currencies with the help of government for that people, which means that the student will spend his scholarship tokens only for educational purpose. Okay, so in that case, this registration is to be restricted to that person who is registering the student. In that case, the address from which the contract has been deployed, that is, we have selected the first address in our case, first address from this list. So only that address can do the transact function here. In the case of that contract, scholarship token, scholarship.sol contract, only 2 functions we have restricted. I think that one with student register and another with student supplying the tokens to the students. But there are several other functions like transferring the tokens, etc., that can be accessed by any address, like that specific student address, that can be accessed by that specific student address also. I think your doubt is
Okay, sir. Yeah. Thank you, sir. Thank you so much.
welcome. Anybody else have any doubts regarding this, or if anybody wants to see that sawtooth project again, I can show that. Just try to understand the pattern how these projects are running. By identifying that pattern, we can just test it how it will be running. Then we can go into deep sections. Initially, we have to understand the flow of actions that we are doing. Once we get on board, then we'll be able to get more information. We will be able to dive deep. But initially, we have to understand what are the different components. What are the different components in an application? In the case of Sawtooth, we have to understand that we have client side and TP side. We have a Docker environment, Docker container inside that the project will be running. We have to understand that set of things. In the case of Ethereum, we have to understand, and we can write these Solidity smart contracts using an Remix Online IDE. We can write these smart contracts here. We can just deploy it in the Remix itself using the JavaScript VM. But instead of that, to be more specific, we can install a Ganache blockchain simulator. We can connect the Remix with the Ganache. After connecting, we'll be getting the 10 addresses with 100 ethers in the Ganache in the Remix. From there, we can deploy this contract. We can interact with the blockchain simulator. So we'll get to know that how a real blockchain network will be running. It is something similar to the Ganache. It's not actually the Ganache. Ganache is only a simulator, but it will be able to understand each and everything, like transactions, what is transaction, how the blocks is created, what is gas fee, gas limit, and logs, etc., how it will be connected, and mining. In the case of Ganache, it is auto mining. In the Ethereum, we have proof of proof of stake is going to be happening. Initially, now we are having proof of work, which is heavy, and Ethereum team is trying to convert to proof of stake consensus. Then it will be much easier to mine. There are no electrical power or any other computational power required, will not be required to mine in that case. So if anybody have any doubt regarding the flow of interacting with these applications, you guys can ask me. Okay, then I'll do one thing. I'll just show the Ganesh CLI, and I'll just try to connect these contracts to the Ganesh CLI instead of using GUI. Here we were using the GUI. I'll just try to connect to the CLI and try to link it, and we'll try to deploy the contract, this symbol storage contract or scholarship contract, to that CLI Ganesh.
Rashmir, I think we've got some queries in the chat regarding some errors.
Okay, fine. Yeah, I'll just check it. Okay, so GitHub link in the chat, right? Okay, I'll just share it. Okay, Madhu Babu, getting this error when working with student with smartphone transaction error encoding arguments invalid address. Why port has been changed to 5777 automatically, so could not deploy. It's not 5777. Mr. Kalai Selvi. Actually, it's not 5777. It is just denoting 5777 custom network. You guys have to connect to, if you are using the GUI, you have to connect to 7545. It will be 8545 in that description. Just change it to 7545. 5777 custom network showing on the left side, just ignore it. No need to bother about it. Madhu Babu sir, can Madhu Babu come on? Can speak to me directly?
Sir, this is Madhubabu.
Okay, fine. Tell me, please.
Sir, I had successfully created the smart contractor in the remix.
Okay.
I had copied the code from your
GitHub.
GitHub.
Okay.
And just what I done is in the compile section, I have changed the version of the compiler to 0.6.0 plus commit.
Okay.
And it compiled successfully.
Okay.
Thereafter, I had deployed it in the Web3 provider, that is nothing but our Ganache.
Okay.
And in the first node itself, I have deployed it.
Okay.
And successfully deployed and created a block
on the Ganache. Okay.
The Ganache. And at the bottom, when we see the deployed contracts where we can create the new blocks, in that section, we are having a register tab.
On Remix?
Yes, on Remix.
Where? On Remix, which side?
On Remix, in the deploy section, when we go at the left side, when you go at bottom, you'll be having deployed contracts.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, when I drop down it, you'll be having a register.
Yeah, okay.
At the register, I have filled all the details: student ID, name, course, Mark 1, Mark 2, Mark 3.
Okay.
And when I
the
click
case of the thing is that in the case of register, you have to enter the name, address, name, and caste of the student only.
Oh.
After transacting that transaction, again you have to go to the above income function. Then you have to access that income function. Then again you have to go to the marks function. You have to do that separately.
Oh.
You cannot fill all that in single time, and you cannot transact it.
So first I need to make student
I'll do one thing. I'll just do with you itself. Okay.
Okay.
So right now I'm run. One second. I'll just share the screen. Okay. Right now I'm running the Ganache. Okay.
Yeah.
Then I'll select the contract from my list. Scholarship is the contract that you have deployed, right?
No, student register.
Student register.
Yeah.
So you have taken which contract from the okay, student details, register, smart contract, solidity.
Solidity,
right?
yes.
You have to take Ethereum project 3S from my GitHub.
Oh,
okay, fine, no problem. It is separate, but inside that Ethereum project 3S, you will be having the same smart contracts. Anyway, I'll do one thing. I'll just do once again. After selecting the student register or scholarship, anything, any contract, you have successfully deployed it, right?
Yes.
Okay. So once again, let me also. Okay. Okay. After deploying, while accessing that function, you got error, right?
Yeah.
So
After deploying,
what are the fields inside that function?
ID, student name,
student ID, student name, course.
college.
Not the college, it's course. Mark 1, Mark 2, Mark 3.
Okay. So that is another contract. Actually, I think that there might be some issues with that contract, but I have not checked into that. All I have mentioned Ethereum project 3S contract. In the GitHub, you will be having Ethereum project 3S section. Inside that, you will be getting smart contracts. From that, the same exact contract that I have used in this remix will be available inside that.
Okay, fine.
Actually, I don't know whether there is an issue inside that contract and all, because that is another project. I haven't gone through that. Okay. So if you want to interact with the contracts that we have discussed today, you will get it inside Ethereum project 3S. Just go inside Ethereum project 3S. You will be having a folder named smart contracts. Inside that, 4 contracts will be available.
Yeah, got it.
Just copy and paste in the remix and just do the cycle. Okay.
Okay, fine. Thank you.
Bye. Anybody else have any issues? Somebody else was telling about custom 5777 network or something like that. Is it solved?
Yes, sir.
Okay, fine. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, welcome. So we have covered Sawtooth project as well as Ethereum based smart contract projects deployed to Ganache. So if furthermore, if anybody have any queries or anything related to any doubts.
Ajmal, we've got a question in the chat box.
Okay. Yeah, okay. By mentioning the port, are we able to access Ganesh from the remix? Yes. By mentioning the port, you can both receive functions and notify. Okay, gas used meant what? Actually, I have explained that earlier. Gas, actually, we have to spend some ethers in order to transact transactions into the blockchain. In the case of deploying the contract into the blockchain as well as interacting with the contract, that means interacting means writing any data for retrieving, like calling for call functions. We do not need to spend the gas, but for storing data, for interacting with the smart contract, like transactions, we have to spend some ether, and these ethers will be spent based upon gas units. It is a technique used in order to control the attack that can be made into the chain. If anyone is if a malicious person in the network is trying to do multiple transactions continuously, a huge amount of transactions continuously, the network will be having a congestion. In order to avoid that, they have introduced a gas system. So in order to do the transactions, we have to spend some gas fee, that in terms of ethers in order to do the transaction into the blockchain, so that only the genuine user will be using will be doing a transaction. I think the doubt is cleared on that question. Is it possible to nest a yeah, okay. Nest a contract. The thing is that we can inherit a contract into another contract. Okay, so but nesting in the sense a contract inside a contract is not possible. I think so. We can inherit a contract. Each contract is separate entity, but we can inherit a contract to another contract. Is it possible to provide? Oh, yeah, fine. Okay, Matthew. I'll just give the email ID. Mm, mm, and anybody can ask. I'll just share my email ID. Anybody can ask any doubts. If it is known by me, I'll try to help you guys. Okay, just share it. Okay, so I'll just type. Okay, I'll just give my mail ID in the chat. Okay. Okay, so whether to use Fabric, Sawtooth, or Ethereum, what are the criteria to select a particular platform? Okay, that's a good question. Okay, so in terms of private blockchains, like consortiums of certain banks or certain private institutions, we use private chains. In the case of private chains, we have Hyperledger Fabric as well as Hyperledger Sawtooth. Sawtooth is usually nowadays seen to be used in supply chain projects. For example, in the case of supply chain transactions projects, Sawtooth is seen to be used, and but Fabric is used in any other private network projects. For example, in the case of Fabric, I'm not specialized in Fabric, but I'll just give a small information that in the case of Fabric, we have private channels options. We can do transactions privately between two peers in a network. So such kind of facilities available in the Fabric. So based upon the type and nature of the project, we can use the Fabric or Sawtooth. And Coda is used usually in bank projects. Coda is not actually a blockchain, but something similar to blockchain. As far as I know, Coda is not an entire blockchain type thing. Coda is separate from that. In the case of Ethereum, Ethereum is the most beautiful blockchain. Ethereum is public. People who are interested in blockchain and blockchain projects look into Ethereum and such kind of public chains. We have EOS and many other public chains, and these public chains have their native tokens also. And when it comes to public chains, it is actually the correct decentralization. And distributed and decentralized. Actually, blockchain gives a decentralization and distribution in a protected manner. To be the entire network will be tamper proof. That is the main advantage of the blockchain. So when it comes to Ethereum, such kind of public chains, we can use such kind of projects for that. For example, in the case of private entities participating projects, the number of persons the number of persons involved will be a limited number in the case of private projects. So in that case, we can use a private chain, because those parties will be in a consensus, and they know they don't want another person to be entering into that network. So we use private chains and private blockchain projects. In the case of public chains, anybody can be a node, and it can be converted into a decentralized network with um, multiple number of nodes from different parts and all together in a single distributed network. I have shared my email ID in the chat. I'll just anybody have any questions or any doubts regarding the project, you guys can mail me. I'll just try to help. All I just want to know is that you guys got the flow pattern of how the project is going. Okay, so if you got that pattern, definitely you will be able to deep dive. The main aim from my side was to just to make you understand that pattern. We cannot study the entire thing on a small session. So but if we get that pattern and start, then you guys can go with that. Okay, yeah, I'm just going to post my email ID on the chat. If you guys have any doubts or any queries regarding these projects, I'll
We've
try to help.
got one more question from Mr. Pradeep Kumar.
Okay,
For
sure.
blockchain, which software is the best, easily done, easily understood to learn?
In the case of blockchain, as far as Ethereum is concerned, you can use this Remix ID and Ganache to start with. Then you have Get, where you can run a blockchain node, Ethereum node, and Get is a Ethereum client where you can run an Ethereum node. But initially, you can go with Remix and Ganache when we do with Ethereum. In the case of private chains, Sawtooth is the best option. Then you have Fabric. But one thing I have to mention is that even though the Fabric was the matured one in the beginning, Hyperledger Fabric has some advantage than Hyperledger Sawtooth, because most of the people in the beginning itself adapted that Fabric, because initially the Fabric was matured, then came the Sawtooth. But when we try to study the Sawtooth, if you have some basic skills in programming, like in Java, in languages like JavaScript or Python, you can start with Sawtooth, because Sawtooth has a structure. Today I've just briefly explained that structure. You can understand that structure and try to manipulate and edit small part of that project, and you can run the project, so that if the project is running good, you can try to manipulate and edit more parts. Like that, you can understand the entire structure. Somebody is texting me that you didn't get the mail ID. Actually, I have posted my email ID in the chat to everyone.
We've got
Sir,
another interesting question. I think most of the participants would like to know, what are the technical skills that we require or we should learn or train to be good in blockchain?
Initially, tech skills means you guys have to be you guys have to select some language, like in which language you guys are going to practice. If you have a skill, I mean, like knowledge in JavaScript or Python, you can just select you can use online platforms like this, like Remix, and in the case of Remix, you have to know Solidity as well. In the case of Sawtooth and all, with JavaScript knowledge, you can start running the project.
just came to know our Hindi family member's father passed away due to massive heart attack.
Pardon?
That's one question, please.
Hello.
Hello, sir.
Tell me.
Sir, there is a Node.js and Python both are need, sir. Only Node.js is enough for Fabric, sir.
No, in the case of Sawtooth, I'm talking. Okay, in the case of Fabric, also you can use. I think Fabric has Python SDK as well as JavaScript SDK. Node.js, we are using Node.js. Like I'm talking about the language. If we have Python SDKs and JavaScript SDKs, either you can use Python or JavaScript. Okay. In the
Okay,
case
what
of
are the things that we have to install for Fabric, sir?
okay. In the case of Fabric,
Uh,
I'm not specialized in Fabric, but Fabric you have to run the. I think Fabric can be run in the Docker environment itself. You can go to the
Docker.
docs.fabric.com, docs.hyperledger.com. In that, you will get the Fabric section. From there, you will be
Okay.
able to get, just note it, docs.hyperledger.org/fabric. From there, you will be able to get a small set of code snippet in which you can run the small unit of Fabric.
Okay, sir. Okay, sir. Actually, education system Sawtooth is better or Fabric is better, sir, for education application, education system.
Education system, I think you go with Sawtooth. It will be much good because Fabric has some complex architecture. When compared to Fabric, Sawtooth has some more good type of architecture. Like it will be able. It is understandable. Okay.
Sawtooth.
Yeah, Sawtooth is understandable, as well as if anybody, in the case of in the purpose of education and all, if we get that pattern, as I said earlier, we'll be able to deep dive into Sawtooth. So it will be better to go with Sawtooth, but both are important and both are good as well, Fabric as well as Sawtooth.
It will be easy to write a program, sir. Sawtooth, sir.
It depends upon the developer. It depends upon person to person.
Okay.
We cannot guess that.
Okay, what are the databases, sir, we have to use for Sawtooth, sir? Database, like Oracle.
No need of that. The thing is that I think LMDB is the database used in the Sawtooth framework. In the case of Sawtooth, the most advantageable thing is that even though if we are using the Sawtooth natively or in the container, the entire frame is available. Okay, we just need to write the application on top of that. So all that application is also written nowadays, and actually today I have shared my code with you. Okay, these are the application written on top of the blockchain. I mean Sawtooth framework. So now we have the framework as well as the application. The only thing that we have to do is to customize the application based upon our requirement.
Okay. Thank you, sir.
Okay, fine. Welcome.
Okay, Ajmal, I think there are no more questions. Can we wind up the session?
Yeah, okay. So I think, one second, please.
Sure.
Okay, so today we have gone through some part of Ethereum as well as through the Sawtooth application, and very happy to be part of this program. Actually, my intention was to get you guys through these applications just to know how these applications work and what kind of components these applications have. And most of the participants have participated actively. I'm glad about that. And if you guys have any further doubt, you guys can contact me through my email ID, and I'm sharing my LinkedIn also here. If you have any doubt, you can go and just drop a mail or can chat through the LinkedIn. And if I'm able to help you, I'll definitely help you. Oh, everybody have a limited knowledge, so with my limitations, definitely I'll be trying to help you guys. Okay, so try to realize, like, if you have time, just with this flow itself, go to the GitHub link and try to get the applications downloaded from my GitHub link. Each application has docs associated with that, so you can go through the documents, you can read it, you can try to understand it. I have written the documents elaborately as much as possible just to understand. You guys can go through that, and if you have any doubt, you can get to me. And the sawtooth application specifically that we have run today is not available in the GitHub, but a similar application with event management is available in the GitHub. You guys can go through that. It will be another experience while doing that. If you have facing any issues with that, you can freely contact me. So I hope that everybody understood some part of this session. If you guys have understood a small part itself, it is a great achievement. Try to be try to go keep learning. Okay, thank you so much. Okay, bye.
Thank you, Mr. Ajmal, for that excellent session, blending in the theoretical and practical aspects with a neat demo on Sawtooth, smart contracts, and Ganesh. We have two exciting sessions coming up today: Application Experience in Philanthropy by Dashida Gilli, CEO of Manch, and Blockchain Stakeholder Engagement by Kirsten Pamela's Langenbrunner, Managing Director, Coalitions Consulting. We'll start the afternoon session by 2 p.m. Take a break, enjoy your lunch, take care.